Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming in tonight. Before we continue on, I'd like to say thank you to David Miller and the Atheist Society, as well as the Unitarian Church, for organizing this event for us tonight. Tonight's talk is titled, Morality Does Not Come from Religion. My name is Marquez Comelab. I am the author of The Tyranny of God. I am not a scientist. I'm not a priest of any religion. So there's no bias for me to argue for or against science or religion. In fact, my background is commerce, banking, accounting, and finance. And I own and manage my own business, and every now and then I write books. I'm like everyone else who has come to a point in their lives when they begin asking the bigger questions. Who are we? Where did we come from? Does God really exist? And I guess for most people who get to that stage, they visit churches or mosques. But in my case, I more or less locked myself at home and researched for almost a year. At the end of this period, I completed a book about what I had discovered for myself. And this is that book, and in it I wrote about the formations of stars and galaxies, the formation of the sun, earth, and the moon, the origin of life, the evolution of life, genetics and natural selection, human evolution, language and ideas, the likely origins of religions, creation stories, the history of religions, the nature of religions, morality, religions in our lives today, in politics today, and the philosophy of reasonism, and consciousness and the soul. Tonight's talk is focusing on morality. Why are we moral? And it will be touching on the likely origins of religions as well as human evolution. The first question I'd like to ask is, how are these related? God, people, religion, and morality. The religious version of the truth, we're talking about Abrahamic religions, would have you believe that God created people and God wanted people to live morally, and these religions would have you believe that they are God's word. In fact, they have in possession Holy Scriptures written by God Himself or through scribes. And this belief persists. It's held just as strongly today by many individuals as it did during Spinoza's time. But is this true? And I think to answer this question, we have to try and go back in time. Because attempting to understand the past helps us visualize early human societies and get a feel for what the world and life must have been like for our early ancestors thousands of years ago, very far away from our lives today, before there were big governments, before there were laws and regulations, before there were police officers to enforce the law, and when violence played a pervasive role in the daily lives of people. And to do this, we can always read about ancient civilizations and watch documentaries about them, but the closest I can bring myself to understand what life must have been like was through the experiences of my ancestors, the Igorot people of the Philippines. Please allow me to paint a picture of a different way of life that is alien to most of you in this room today. The following is based on my father's account of his experiences in the middle of the last century, growing up as a member of the Bugang tribe of the Igorot people who live in the mountain provinces of the Philippines. The Igorot people encountered Christian doctrines when the Spaniards colonized the Philippines in 1521, but the prevailing belief system remains to be animism. And animism is when we assign souls to humans, plants, animals, and other entities. By itself, it's not a religion, but it is a precursor to a religion. Because once we can believe in souls, then we can start believing that souls may live forever and they can be tortured in hell or rewarded in heaven. But we're not here to discuss the religion of the Igorot people, but rather their way of life. The purpose of the following is to get you to visualize the way of life of the Igorot people, to try and understand how our sense of morality evolved. The village of the Bugang people was isolated, but it wasn't the only one among the many villages to sit on the slopes of the Cordillera Mountains. These black and white photographs come from a book published in the 1900s by Albert Ernst Jenks when he first encountered the Igorot people. The book is called The Bontoc Igorot. Here's a glimpse of the Cordillera Mountains. You can see the river there, the rice terraces there, and just at the top there are trees. Here is an artist's impression of an Igorot man in the Cordillera Mountains. So the village contained small houses, just big enough for a space in which to cook and a bed for a couple to sleep in. If the couple had children, they would have a bed for them too. Here's a photograph of an Igorot dwelling. And to show you the size, to give you an idea of the size, you can see it's not too big. There's two children standing in front of the dwelling, and you can see there's only enough space there to sleep in and maybe to cook. Now, after the children reached a certain age, between the ages of 7 to 10, they stopped sleeping in the house. Instead, they went to the Dap-ai or the Upgan to live with and take care of the more senior citizens of the village. The Dap-ai and the Upgan served as sleeping quarters, and the Dap-ai were shared by young boys and old men, and the girls shared the Upgan with the more mature women of the village. The Dap-ai and Upgan also served the role of educational institutions. It was there where young boys and girls learned about life, survival, and the nature of the world from the village elders. The Dap-ai served as a storage house for the village's weapons, including spears, swords, knives, and shields. They were used when conflict with other tribes escalated to violence. Here are pictures of such weapons. Now, during the day, the Dap-ai and the Upgan became village centers. It was there where people would get together, mingle, talk about life's frustrations, and share a few laughs. In modern societies, people go to pubs, clubs, and restaurants in the city to achieve the same goals. But before modernity, life for most people was limited to one small geographical area, only a few kilometers across. So here is such a village. Now, obviously, if the tribe is in good terms with the next village, then the world for them would open up a little bit because they will invite each other to celebrate and that sort of thing. But for most people, they pretty much are born in a village like this, and they will die in that same village. To survive, people relied mainly on planting crops as well as breeding or hunting animals. Here you see a photograph of two women harvesting what seems to me like a root crop. And physical work, therefore, occupied most of their days. You can see a man carrying either wine or water, and a couple carrying their harvest back to their home or their village. Kids also began helping their parents in their tasks as soon as they were big enough to do so. You can see here's a photograph of children pushing a machine in what seems to me like a cornfield. Here are photos of Igorot children helping their parents by working or by taking care of their siblings while their parents worked. Food and other resources for survival were scarce. People lived mainly from corn and sweet potatoes, and having any meat in a meal was rare. The decision to kill one of your chickens or butcher one of your pigs to have meat for dinner was considered good fortune. So it was customary for a couple to not just selfishly prepare such meals only for themselves and their children. There was a sense of obligation and gratitude towards the whole village. This led them to invite everybody else like one big family. Even if there was not enough to go around, the small amount of meat had to be shared so everyone could have a taste. And because living conditions were lean, my father explained that during those harsh years, it was such a pleasure and a rare experience to have the taste and feel of oil and fat in your mouth. Now, this to us is so ordinary. We even cut fat off our meats today to avoid having too many calories, but to people back then, eating meat was so rare. It was such a treat. The responsibility to host was then passed on to another family. On a practical level, we also need to consider that they had no fridges at the time. So despite having methods to preserve meat using salt, we can see it was advantageous for them to somewhat collectively accept that they would all get fresh meat more regularly if a family invited the whole village every time they were fortunate enough to do so. Here's a photograph that can represent what celebrations look like for the Igorot people. It's a bit like going to a nightclub nowadays where you stand around dancing in a circle, but in their case they would have these gongs and have people dance around in circles. Now I asked my father what happened when selfish individuals never invited others, even if they were fortunate enough to have and to eat meat. And my father said people would plainly stop inviting those selfish individuals. And in such an environment, where individuals are reliant on the goodwill of other people, being ostracized by your extended family leaves you vulnerable to face your troubles alone. If you are selfish enough not to share your good fortune with others, you will be treated in kind. When you would need food in times of famine, you might be left to fend on your own. Here are photos to show how Igorot societies have evolved to work together as a community, and so they have evolved to rely on each other. Their community is a community from which one would want to avoid being ostracized. I asked my father how they dealt with criminal behavior, to which he replied, if someone was found to have wronged another member of the village, and if the crime was significant enough, everybody gathered to decide what needed to be done. Punishments varied depending on the nature and motivation of the crime. Fines were an option. An offender sometimes gave property like livestock to the victim, or the offender offered his or her physical services to work for the victim. Then how did such a society deal with violent crime, like rape? And the answer I got was interesting. He said, we have to remember that in such a small village, everyone knew everyone. Every woman is someone's daughter, someone's girlfriend, or someone's sister, and violating her rights as a person can anger her father, her boyfriend, or her brothers enough to have one beat up or even killed. So not only was raping wrong, it was fatal. Now, I'd like to warn you that the next slide is a disturbing image, so for you guys who are a bit queasy in these sort of gory images, turn around, it's only going to be for one slide. This slide shows a beheaded human body on its way to burial. With weapons designed to cut heads, beheading is usually the result of violent encounters between individuals who quarrel, as well as in tribal wars. Now, in a case where a man raped a woman and the man was not killed as a result, he was obliged to marry her and take care of her should she accept him. My father therefore added that it was highly likely for such a system to have been abused when males started using rape as a risky strategy to get the wives they wanted. It may have been grossly unfair for a woman, but there were not many alternatives. Running away to another place, away from the protection and support of her bloodline, was unthinkable and unlikely. There was no police to protect her rights. If she was impregnated, she ran the risk of raising the baby on her own. There was no social welfare funded by taxpayers to provide for her needs. And if she did not get pregnant, there was also a stigma that prevented men from marrying her because she would have been considered as second-hand. So as unjust as it was, women were more likely to concede to marrying the man. Here are photos of Igorot women. The first one is a woman spinning thread on her thigh and a Banawi woman with tattoos. Banawi, Bontok, Bugang, they are all names of tribes of Igorot people. With the scarcity of food and in a world without money, many people transacted using the barter system. It was common custom to help a neighbor build his house, till his land, or perform any work for him or her, and expect nothing in return but the courtesy of being fed. Now, of course, the Igorot people did not see economics as we do today, because today we see everything in monetary terms. An hour of service, for example, amounts to $20, whereas a meal costs, say, $30. To these ancient peoples, however, the transaction between hours of work and a meal or two were not measured by some utilitarian concept like money. Rather, they had built an economy that used the currency of goodwill, gratitude, relationships, and reputations. If you helped me build my house today and I only gave you 2 meals for it, the monetary value of a meal versus its value in hours of service would be irrelevant. What matters is that we have built a relationship, and if you become hungry in the future, I will feed you. When you need to build your house too, I will be there. So it is as if human beings have an internal accounting system. We take into account the goodwill and generosity we receive from a person, and we balance this account with the animosity and the selfishness that we have been shown by that same person. So if in general someone had been friendly, kind, and generous to us in the past, we are likely to reciprocate. If, however, someone had treated us harshly, we may avoid having to deal with him or her in the future. We become indifferent and we stop caring for that person. Here are extra photographs of Igorot men. They're holding gongs, metallic instruments, and as you might see, the handle of the gongs are actually made from the jaws of their enemies. Here are images of Igorot men with tattoos, and here is a photograph of prominent Bontoc men. Now, men of a certain experienced age are looked upon by their village to guide them in matters of justice, battle, health, plantation, and so on. Collectively, they perform governance roles. My father belonged to the last generation of boys who got to experience what it was like to grow up in the Dap-ai. As the world modernized, it became easier for young people to go to the cities and explore more of the world. The old ways of living faded out. We now leave the Igorot people. My main objective in covering this subject is for us to think about how ancient enclaves of people may have organized their societies without specific guidance from any holy scripture purported to be written by God, most especially the Quran, the Bible, or the Tanakh. The narrative gives us specific examples regarding human behavior that will soon be useful to our discussion. Getting back to what's ahead of us, we need to ask, what does it mean to be moral? Now, the golden rule, the one that says, do unto others what you want them to do unto you, has been quoted by and quoted in China by Confucius around 551 BC, in Greece by the Pittacus of Mytilene around 640 BC, in Greece by Isocrates around 436 BC, and by Epictetus around 55 AD. It's also been mentioned in Taoism, ancient Egypt, by Native American Indians, Hinduism, and so on. The Golden Rule is the ethical foundation of most cultures and religions. Notice that the Golden Rule focuses on what we do as opposed to our underlying motive or the consequence of our actions. Having stood the test of time, we will therefore choose to define morality in the same sense. Therefore, when we talk about morality in tonight's context, we are referring to actions, the things we do. Because the Golden Rule is quoted in many religious texts, many people presume that it is a product of religion. Tonight, I will make the point that the Golden Rule is not a product of religion. I will be discussing how we are moral beings, with or without religion, and why I feel that religion is getting undue credit for something that is naturally human. What makes us moral? That's the next question. I've identified 3 universal truths about human beings. The first one is happiness. Human beings want to be happy. They don't want to suffer, they want to be happy. Number 2, human beings reciprocate. Human beings respond in kind. We treat other people as we are treated, and they treat us the way we treat them. In our discussion of ancient tribes, I propose that human beings have some form of inbuilt accounting mechanism that accounts for the goodwill and generosity they receive from other individuals. They then balance this account with the hostility and selfishness they receive from those same individuals. And I call this mechanism the mechanism for reciprocity. The third truth about human beings is that we are social animals. We evolved from earlier primates, and like them, we evolved to be social beings. And because of this, none of us are willing to live alone. For most of us, life seems unnatural, spent isolated on an island or up on a mountain somewhere. Because if you think about it, we need other people in order to experience the joys of sharing, working together, and living life together. Everything we value in life, all the pleasures we seek, laughter, joy, compliments, praise, gratitude, admiration, esteem, and respect, they all require us to be with other people. If we want to live peaceful, harmonious lives, we really have no choice. If we continuously mistreat other people, we will suffer pain, isolation, and rejection from the rest of our kind. We choose to live by the Golden Rule not because Jesus, Confucius, or ancient Egyptians have told us, but rather because we are penalized if we do not practice it. Living by the Golden Rule is therefore not necessarily an intellectual or a moral choice. Out of the necessity to live with other human beings, each of us will inevitably come upon the Golden Rule. We do not need anybody else telling us about it. Even without any formalized moral code, religion or law, it is inevitable for us to discover it for ourselves. These three universal truths about our humanity explain much about our behavior. They interact with each other in three different ways that allow, force or pressure us to live moral lives. Here is my moral stool. What it shows is that we behave morally, and that is supported by three universal truths about human beings, and that is that we all want to be happy, we all reciprocate, and we all are social animals. So how exactly does human nature allow, force, or pressure us to live moral lives? That's the next question. And I've put together this pyramid of human interaction and development to explain why we behave. And it shows three pressure points. And what this pyramid says is that we are disciplined to be kind and we are deterred to be unkind because of the forces of violence, threats, fear, and coercion. The next one is that we perform moral acts of kindness in exchange for others. So in a sense, we are using moral acts and favors as currency. And the third pressure point for us to be moral is that we lead moral lives because we want to be honored and respected. The next few minutes of this talk is obviously for me to justify why I make such big statements. Now, without religion, law and law enforcement, human beings seek to control the behavior of other individuals by using the most primal tools at their disposal: violence, threats, fear, and coercion. So in a state of lawlessness, human beings deter people from mistreating them by using threats such as steal my property or mistreat any member of my family and I will do such and such to you. We terrorize and compel one another into behaving because we have the capacity to inflict violence for revenge and recrimination. And it's because of this that we have a lot more sense than going around hitting people, because we know that they can hit us back. Or if they're not able, they get someone else to hit us back. Maybe not now, but later. Maybe not this time, but next time. We cannot break into someone else's property and steal, because if they catch us, they will do everything in their power to teach us a lesson. When we mistreat other people, we can expect possible retaliation, that they will mistreat us back. So even without God, we have it in us to police one another. We set our expectations. We tell people how we want to be treated, and we warn them about what will happen if they cross the boundaries we set. Therefore, there's a strong deterrence to be unkind to others. Other human beings can retaliate and subject us to just as much violence, threat, fear, and coercion as we can onto them. Eventually then, as human societies evolve, humans establish rules for people to follow and will agree to isolate, punish, or kill those who do not abide by these rules. We might think that using violence, threats, and coercion as methods to influence our world equates as being backward and primitive. But is it really? We only need to read about local and current world affairs to find that their use remains prevalent even in countries with citizens who claim are enlightened. People do not necessarily resort to violence to get what they want. So without religion, law and police, people will continue to do favors and perform acts of kindness to one another in exchange for benefits to serve their interests. In a sense, moral acts are being used as currency, and the idea is simple. I'll be nice to you and I expect you to be nice to me. Here are examples of how we use moral acts as currencies of exchange. Scratch my back and I'll scratch yours. I'll stay up and watch guard for enemies or predators while you sleep, and afterwards, when you wake up, I'll sleep and you look out for us. I'll share my food today because you do not have any, but when I have no food tomorrow, I expect you to return the favor. You tell me what you know, and I'll tell you what I know. Fix my car, and I'll do your taxes. Now, the act of giving someone your hard-earned money can be considered a moral act, which we can exchange for another benefit. For example, you work for me and I'll give you $20 per hour to contribute to your children's school fees. You give me your $100 and this pair of shoes is yours so you can protect your feet. I'll give you 4 of my residential houses for your big hotel. Now, the distinctive feature with all the statements above is that they all offer to make deals. They need the other person to accept the deal before the good deed is carried out. When agreements are done fairly, the outcome of any transaction will be fair, equitable, and favorable to both parties. Using favors as a form of currency works best when there are established rules, laws, and regulations that people abide by. Today, we no longer rely on brute force to get what we want because we and our ancestors have built a world that is able to support commerce to meet people's needs. Now, at its extremes, the weakness of such a system of exchange, however, is that people will have no motivation to be kind when there's nothing in it for them. A society built purely on this form of morality rewards mostly selfish and opportunistic behavior. No doubt, it makes for a far better world compared to one that is ruled by violence. But it is still not ideal. There is another class of favors and acts of kindness that can be reciprocated. People doing others a favor without expecting anything back from the receiver. These acts of kindness foster honor and respect from other people who become inclined to reciprocate back. This brings us to the third pressure point that makes us moral beings. The most powerful force that drives our behavior is our ambition. When people hear the word ambition, they think of money or career, but that's not what I mean by ambition. Ambitions might vary from person to person. Each of us, to whatever degree, is yearning or longing to realize the achievement or the attainment of happiness in our lives. We strive to come close to our idea of what the ideal person would be or should be like. This desire is what compels us to do what we need to do, to have what we need to have, and to be what we want to be. Many women strive to be the best mother to their children by supporting them and caring for them, and many men strive to be the best husband to their wife and father to their children by becoming a good provider to their needs. Our ambitions depend on what we each value most in our lives. Some people strive for emotional and mental peace and tranquility. Others seek power. Others crave for meaningful relationships. And others strive to achieve financial freedom. But regardless of our individual ambitions, we will learn that the only way to get what we want is not through terrorizing and extorting people. We will never live in peace to enjoy anything when we are constantly watching our backs, twisting and turning, in a world where we trust no one and we have no one to love. We will also learn that when we rely solely on the utilitarian power of doing favors for favors, all our achievements and accomplishments will be meaningless and empty. We will realize that people who are there celebrating with us are selfish people who are only by our side for their own interests. Many of us will then come to realize that we will never come close to achieving our ambitions if people do not trust, believe, or respect us. In the end, we all want to be honored and respected. We want and need our wives, husbands, relatives, friends, acquaintances, and even strangers to honor and respect us. Most importantly, we want self-respect. Now, what is honor? To honor is to have great respect. When we are worthy of great respect, it is because people believe in us. They believe in us because they trust us. They trust us because we are credible. And we are credible because we treat others with dignity and we continuously prove our capacity to behave and act with utmost honesty and personal integrity. We take responsibility for what we say and we have the courage to say the truth and do what is right. Only when we demonstrate these things will people begin to honor us. Only then may we have true respect for ourselves. We will eventually come to understand that the best way to achieve our ambitions, to determine our fate and seek fulfillment, is to treat other people the same way we want them to treat us. In fulfilling this need, we understand that people will never respect us if we steal, kill, or destroy their property. We cannot earn respect by threatening people, and we cannot buy respect from other people. Respect is earned first before people will honor us. There are no shortcuts. The only way to be respected is to be respectable. The only way to be honored is to be honorable. In this talk, I sought to explain why we, as human beings, are predisposed to act morally towards other human beings. Driven to achieve our ambitions, we naturally desire and aspire to be considered by others and ourselves as being moral. In exchange for others' kindness, we perform moral acts for other people who in turn reciprocate the gesture. At the very least, even if we do not have an inclination to be kind to other people, we acknowledge that it is for our safety and well-being that we do not act violently, threateningly, and coercively towards fellow human beings. We acknowledge that if we hurt others, they too can reciprocate the favor and subject us to acts of brutality. Therefore, at any stage of human evolution, even when humanity has no religion or law, humanity will be guided by its nature to discover the golden rule. Individuals will realize that they should treat others as they themselves want to be treated. Our ancestors arrived to the same conclusions, because after all, they were also human beings, social animals whom, like us, were predisposed to treat others the way they were treated. In conclusion, morality does not come from religion. It is humanity that predisposes us to be moral. Therefore, it is us, human beings, who give our sense of morality to the religions we invent and to those we have already invented. Thank you.